So this is the second part or continuation of my current antique book restoration project, which is an 8-volume set from 1905 called History of Our Country by Edward Ellis. This was actually a limited edition. I believe 500 copies were made. It was considered a deluxe edition and included many illustrations, a few color plates. And the issue here, the inside of the books were in excellent condition, as I mentioned before, in terms of the paper, the edges, the end papers, and so on. But it has had serious red rot, which is a condition that deteriorates the leather, and it just gets worse over time. I mean, I'm one of those people that, I like the character of old books, and a great many of the problems with old books, I'll leave alone. But this is a situation that it only gets worse if you don't do anything about it. And the red rot creates a dust that gets all over everything it touches, so the books become sort of, well, basically unusable. You can't put them on a bookshelf, have them around other books, or really anything other than store them in a box because of the dust from the red rot. So what we did before was we applied Klucel G, which is a consolidant. So where we're at now is that we're going to restore some color, and then we're going to do a final step of protecting with something called SC6000, which is a compound that will seal and protect, and it looks a lot like, almost like a beeswax or something like that. What I have here is this book. We've already done some restoration of color, whereas this volume we have not. And what I'm using is actually not a dye, it's a shoe cream. However, as I mentioned before, it is not a shoe polish per se. You do not want to put shoe polish on book leather. Now again, there are areas here that you're going to have to leave alone because there's simply no way, for example, that you're going to get in between all of the detail of this gilt on the spine and be able to restore that. And it's an old book. I mean, you're not trying to make this look like a brand new book. So again, you use your own judgment there about how far you want to go with that, how much you want to try to correct, so to speak. Okay, so I actually will go up to the there's a little gilt border here, and I'll push up again. Now, like I said, if you get this on the gilt, you can use this to try to pull that off. As far as these edges here of the boards, I mean, you can come back and deal with that a little later. I try to move along kind of slowly, but not too slowly, just so that I can kind of keep things even. I'm kind of going up to the edge and then pulling back with the brush. Now, what I'll do here shortly is I like to kind of go back with the cloth and sort of brush over it and maybe pull off a little, so you're pulling off the excess. I don't want a very thick layer of this. We just want kind of a thin layer. Now I'm going to use a smaller brush to go over this line where the hinge is. Okay, and so now we will start on the spine, which I usually will go over the raised areas first, and anything else that is not does not have gilt or of a different color from the dye that I'm using. Okay, so I'm just going to wait a couple minutes, and I'm just going to sort of brush this off and pull off so that it's not too thick. Okay, so what I've done here is pretty much color in most of this except for the areas with the words. I usually do that last. It's a little trickier. Now, on the corners, I'm going to do the same thing I did here. You just want to be very careful that you don't get your dye anywhere near the end papers or any of the paper. Okay, so basically going to go back here, and again, how much of this you would color depends on, well, how important restoring the color is to you, but also how good your dye match is. I mean, if you had an absolutely perfect match, you know, you could simply color in the worst of the damage and leave it at that. However, if your match is not quite so perfect, you may have to do the entire area, and you'll have to think about that before you begin. Otherwise, you'll have a big problem on your hands. Now, on these areas here where we have a lot of words, which I have already been working on, and I don't want to take an enormous amount of time on it, but you do want to go rather slowly. I will just say that depending on your eyesight, fortunately for me, I'm nearsighted, so I can see very good up close, and your aim with a paintbrush and the size of your brush and so on, you can either do a great job or a horrible job on this part. So you want to take your time, and like I said, I keep plenty of cotton swabs to move over the gilt. You know, just pretend you're coloring with crayons in a coloring book and relax, and in a few minutes it'll come together. Now, I have found that, as with many other activities, this is one of those things that as you're doing it, you will kind of get into a groove or get into a zone, and I find that's very difficult to do while you're trying to make a video. I've had it's been a little awkward for me on this because normally when I do it, I'm alone, it's quiet, or maybe I have some music or the TV on or something, but I pretty much go into a zone and there's no distraction. And so when I normally do these videos, I do them for myself and there's no narration. It's just like a record of my project. But since I decided to share this, I realized I had to narrate, and in doing so I find myself very distracted because I always thought I could walk and chew gum at the same time, but in this case it's been a little tricky. So here we have, I've done the spine, I've done the front leather portion of the front board, and as I said, well, I may not have said that when I feel this has really had some time to dry, I'll go back and sort of brush it again lightly, and then I'll let this dry until tomorrow. I'll flip it over and do the other side.